Hello and welcome to Mazz Hobbies. If you watched this, and got excited, then this video is for you. We're going to have a look at this video that came from Games Workshop, which we believe speculates on the teasing of Warhammer Age of Sigmar 4th edition. We're going to have a little bit of a look at how Warhammer Age of Sigmar has evolved over its editions, and we're going to speculate about what we could expect to see in the 4th edition of Age of Sigmar, based on how the game has evolved against other Games Workshop games over the last couple of editions. I'm Dave, this is Mazz Hobbies. I hope you enjoyed this video. So Age of Sigmar 1st edition was released back in 2015. And this was a very different game to the game that we have today. When it was originally released, it was described very much as a beer and pretzels kind of game. The kind of game that you could get a bunch of mates over with very easy army composition, very simplified rule system, and just have fun playing a series of games. It did introduce the concepts of narrative-based play, which have run through all of the editions since that first edition. On top of this, it also introduced the concept of a mission style of gameplay. So when you look at Age of Sigmar as it was back in the first edition, that introduction of missions-based play, when you think its comparator at the time was the previous game of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, was quite a significant change from the way that we had approached the fantasy-based Games Workshop games in the past. Now, what you will find as we look through the editions of Age of Sigmar is since that release of the first edition, Games Workshop has changed its approach to how it releases updates to its two main game systems, Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So if you look at the time frame that Games Workshop has introduced, it's very much an interlaced time frame where you will have a new release of an edition of Warhammer 40k, followed normally a year or two later by a release of a new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. And it typically works on a 3-year rotation. So you have the game edition released and runs for 12 months. Then typically you will have the second game have its new edition released and run for 12 months. And then you'll have a 12-month overlap where there is a gap in release of game editions. And that's pretty much the model that Games Workshop tends to run with. If you're interested in why they run with this model, well, actually, you could think that it's because they want to have time to play out the game system and test the game systems before bringing in an entirely new system. They want to see how the previous system has played out in competitive play. And it could very well be that. But actually, if you're a cynic like me, you need to delve into the real metrics behind Games Workshop. And as a public limited company, the metrics behind Games Workshop are entirely about generating profit, which translates into dividends for Games Workshop shareholders. And that's what the company does exist to do. And by having a regular pipeline of releases timed to key financial points, then you can better influence what your eventual share price value is, deliver better dividends for your shareholders, and ensure they maintain the value of their shares. Okay, enough of the finances. Let's have a look at what we're actually here for, which is Age of Sigmar and what's going to happen. Well, Age of Sigmar evolved from that first edition. The release of Age of Sigmar 2nd edition in 2018 was a complete re-overhaul of the game system. It essentially brought the game system closer to the system we have now. Previously, units didn't have a points value attached to them. That changed, and Age of Sigmar 2 brought in a points value for units and characters. It streamlined the army composition, so there was a better element of parity between how you constructed your army and how your opponent constructed their army. It introduced allegiance abilities, so abilities that were reflective of the grand alliance that you chose your army from. And it made the game from a beer and pretzels game into a game that you could play competitively, either in friendlies against a friend, at a local gaming club, or at tournaments. And it really laid the foundation for the Age of Sigmar that we enjoy at the moment. Age of Sigmar 3 came about in 2021, and what Age of Sigmar 3 brought with it was a complete re-evaluation of the concept of the secondary part of the game. So in the game, you can score points by achieving your primary scoring, which is by getting on objectives, controlling objectives and scoring points, or you can score points by secondary scoring, which is either via completion of your grand strategy, completing your battle tactics, or completing specific mission or battle plan dependent objective targets. And Age of Sigmar 3 really created that side of the game, and I think this is what turned the game from being a strategic game. I always described it as essentially a strategic game of chess against an opponent playing with miniatures, into a 3D game of chess where your ability to score isn't just about the primary, it also brings in all the aspects of the secondary. So it made it a much more strategic, tactical game, and has made it a game that has really picked up a huge following now in competitive gaming circles, and has made it the game that we love today. So let's move on and think about Age of Sigmar 4 and maybe speculate a bit about what the likely changes could be. Well, I'll start this by saying I don't have any links to Games Workshop. I don't have any secret insider information. So all of this is entirely speculation. But it's speculation that's informed by how the game has developed previously. And quite often we see things that come into Age of Sigmar often have come about because of changes to Warhammer 40k. Now, we can start off by looking at the recent release of Warhammer 40k 10th edition, which was released last year. In that, we saw some interesting changes, the first of which was the ability for characters to join into units again. And I suppose this leads to my first aspect of speculation. In Age of Sigmar 4, are we going to see a system where characters can join units? Now, the reason I speculate on this is for a number of specific reasons. First of all, in Age of Sigmar, we have this kind of hangover to the old fantasy battle system, whereby you could select a champion, musician, banner, and that would have impact on your charge ability, your rally or bravery ability, and would have a better combat profile for your champion. Now, we do see this come into Age of Sigmar currently, but it's not ubiquitous across all units. It seems to be certain units might be able to get a banner, they might be able to get a musician. Most units can get a champion, but not all. Also, there is a varied degree about whether a unit can issue a command to itself. Some units can, as long as they have a champion. Now, what would be an interesting change is if characters within Age of Sigmar were able to join units, and then perhaps gating those benefits to your unit based on whether there is a character joined to that unit. So, for example, if a unit wants to issue commands to itself, then it needs to have a character embedded or attached to that unit. If it doesn't have a character embedded or attached, then it can't issue the commands. Similarly, you could go through unit to unit and state, if you have a character attached, this unit has an additional attack, or this unit has +1 to charge. That would enable a simplification of these rules. It would also enable a little bit of a cost of having those benefits. At the moment, there is no cost. You just select those options with your unit. This would enable a cost to that. But I think finally what it would do, and I think really critical, we have seen over the last 12 to 18 months a higher use of foot hero characters, mainly brought about by the current general handbook for this season of Age of Sigmar. Now, a lot of these foot characters are incredibly weak, typically 5 wounds, typically a 5-up save. They're not going to last very long. Now, in some cases, some units can bodyguard them, but again, that's not standard across, and I think it would be an interesting change if characters were able to be associated with or join units, that would then also provide that bodyguard as a rule that's attached to the character, so that unit would then bodyguard that character. I think that would be a very interesting take on things. I think it would possibly move the game away slightly from the current system, whereby you tend to load your 5 wound, 5 save character. It's your general, it has all of its buffs, and you tend to sit it like this little fragile thing behind your castle of solid units. I think it would make the game much more interesting if those characters could be associated with units. So moving on, the second thing, 10th edition of 40k brought in and simplified the objective control rules for their models. We have a similar system in Age of Sigmar, whereby we class control of an objective by counting up the number of models, and then certain models get certain multipliers. On top of that, certain armies get certain multipliers. On top of that, certain units get certain multipliers. It all becomes incredibly complex, and I think where 40k has really solved this situation is by adding a model's objective control as a number on its data sheet. So you simply look at the data sheet for the units you've got on that objective, you total up their objective control, and you know exactly how many points of objective control you have. Similar system to Age of Sigmar, but much more simplified. I think that's been a really positive change for 40k, and I think it would be an also very positive simplification change for Age of Sigmar. The third thing that I'd like to speculate about is the command point reroll that we see in 40k. It's one of the most difficult things to get your head around when you move from 40k to Age of Sigmar, is that lack of ability to burn a command point to be able to reroll. We have it a little bit in Age of Sigmar. You can do it for a charge roll, but you can't do it for other rolls. And I think really the game has evolved in complexity, and there are some really strategic plans where you can take a model where it has certain abilities, you can be planning it out over a turn or two, you get to the point where you get to use the ability and you fail the roll. And that's part of the game, and I don't have an issue with that. But if you can re-roll a charge, surely you should be able to have a go at re-rolling that. And I think perhaps simplifying the re-roll system by enabling a command point usage to re-roll rather than just only have it for charge rolls, I think would be an exceptionally positive introduction to the game. It could be limited, perhaps limited to once per turn or even once per phase, but I think it would be a very positive change to the game. So what about the double? Now, it's very difficult to talk about how Age of Sigmar might change with the 4th edition without talking about the double turn. This is absolutely vilified by people who play other systems, who want to get into Age of Sigmar, but actually is a real core concept to how Age of Sigmar works. And I think it would be a big change to the game should they eliminate the concept of the double turn. What I will say is, as somebody who came into Age of Sigmar predominantly from a 40k background, I may have hated it at first, but I think that was purely because I didn't understand it. And understanding the strategy about the double, and as you talk to those exceptionally good Age of Sigmar players playing at that top competitive level, they'll often talk about whether they want to make decisions to chance a double early in the game or chance a double later in the game. I think it adds a really interesting strategic depth. Yes, it can be horrible to lose a game on the basis of one dice roll, and often that may be the case, but actually it can also be incredibly exciting when you've planned for a double to occur later in the game rather than earlier in the game, and that's given you the opportunity, as it's played through, to play out this big, long strategic tactic you've been building through the game and win the game. I think that creates a really healthy and really exciting kind of game. And I suppose that leaves us up with the lore. And one of the things Games Workshop has got absolutely right with the release of Age of Sigmar editions has been the way it's wrapped that into the narrative. So we saw with the Realm Gate Wars, the Soul Gate Wars, how the release of a new edition has come on the back of some quite... So we've seen that with the Realm Gate Wars and with the Soul Gate Wars, how the release of a new edition has come on the back of some big changes to the world. And we're building up to that. We have the two Harbinger Crusades moving through the mortal realms, trying to establish new settlements in the name of Sigmar. We have Chaos absolutely hounding at the entire fabric of the mortal realms. And we have Sigmar, who's absent. Sigmar's grace and touch hasn't been felt on the lands for a long time. Where is he? What is he doing? And I think Age of Sigmar 4 is going to bring a momentous change. If I was to speculate, I think it's going to bring about a change that shakes up the Grand Alliances. I think we're going to see Grand Alliances fragmented, perhaps even entirely eliminated. But I think it's going to be a really exciting change to the lore. I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't been this excited about a reveal in a long time. I hope you're looking forward to it too. So thank you for listening. If you enjoy these videos, please give this video a like. I really want to hear your thoughts and your speculation on Age of Sigmar 4th edition. If you can pop those in the comments down below, I think we can have a really exciting chat about this and a debate about how the game might change. Remember, this is all speculation at this point. None of this is based on any kind of firm evidence that I have from Games Workshop. It's just, I suppose, my thought process of what I think is going to change. So thank you for listening to this video. I think it is a interesting time for Age of Sigmar, and we're all hoping that Games Workshop brings out a 4th edition that streamlines some of the things that we get frustrated with in the current edition, but also really shakes up the lore of the world and gives us a whole new phase to get excited about. So from me to you, I hope you have a positive hobby journey. Bye for now.